watching a series of campaign commercials as part of C-SPAN's continuing coverage of Election 90. Up next, a closer look at politics in Texas. On Wednesday, Democratic gubernatorial nominee Ann Richards and Republican gubernatorial nominee Clayton Williams appeared on KDFW television in Dallas. While neither campaign could agree on a debate format, Ms. Richards and Mr. Williams accepted an invitation to appear jointly as part of a regularly scheduled evening news program.
Our News for Texas audience and viewers across the state are about to watch the second and final encounter between Ann Richards and Clayton Williams before one of them becomes our next governor.
The two candidates will debate tonight by satellite. Ann Richards is in our KDFW TV newsroom at the state capitol in Austin. Clayton Williams joins us from Houston at television station KTRK. When the candidates accepted our invitation to debate, we agreed to tell them the subject matter, but not the questions, one day in advance. For this final debate, we have selected the issues of crime and abortion. Each candidate will be allowed 1 minute to answer questions on those topics. The opponent will have 30 seconds rebuttal time. The toss of a coin gave Ms. Richards the first question in our first debate last week. So tonight, we begin with Mr. Williams. Clarice?
Mr. Williams, you've made crime the #1 issue in your campaign. Your commercial on the joys of bustin' rocks made an impact on television viewers. But how is bustin' rocks going to keep first-time offenders from going back to drugs?
Well, there's been a very good success ratio in Georgia at a military boot camp where you bring in military discipline, 5:30 in the morning calisthenics, drug counseling, and meaningful work. But in Georgia, they were cutting grass, and I thought, well, how better to bust some rocks, take the rocks, build barbecue pits, picnic tables, campsites. They pay us back for the damage their habits done while they rehabilitate themselves with meaningful work. In Georgia, it's 65% success 1 year out. It'll work in Texas. The other thing, of course, in a real war on drugs, you got to work on prevention. I want to start teaching our kids about drugs beginning in kindergarten. I want to get in their minds before the drug dealers get there. The other thing, I want to beef up law enforcement to hit the supply side and increase penalties on the users to work on the demand side. You're going to have to come at this drugs and crime from every direction. The key, though, we must double the prisons. 60,000.
Thank you. Your time is up.
units.
Ms. Richards, you have 30 seconds to respond.
The real key to bringing down the crime rate, Clarice, is education. That's the investment we have to make. We're going to have to build more prison beds. There's no question of that. We're going to have to treat those people who are in prison for their addiction. We're going to have to teach them to write, to read. The most important thing, though, that we can do, I think, to bring down the crime rate is for those people that commit violent crime or they're big-time drug dealers and they're sentenced, they're going to serve their full term. They're not going to be back out on the streets victimizing us.
Thank you. Time
and our
is up.
families.
John?
Ms. Richards, would you please explain how your proposed early parole and work release proposals will work? And do you feel such a program will preclude the need for building additional prisons and jails in the state?
Well, I really don't. I think you're going to have to build more jail space. You're going to have to build more beds. The question is, what kind? Are you going to build the less costly ones? Maximum security is the one that costs the most, and that should be reserved for those violent offenders. But we have a very successful work release program here in Travis County where the people work during the day. They come back, they pay the county room and board to stay in the jail at night, and they support their families in the meantime. I believe strongly in boot camps as well. We have another of those that's tremendously successful here in Travis County. I think that the alternatives that are available to us that are less costly and more effective are important for us to do and to execute.
Mr. Williams, you have 30 seconds.
Well, I think that the real truth is that the average criminal today is only serving 1 day out of 6 of their sentence. We're facing major problems. We need 60,000 more prison units, not the 1,800 that Ann talks about, because we are inundated with crime. Dallas, day before yesterday, set another record in number of crimes. We got to get serious about it. And remember, these penitentiaries, prisons, are to protect our citizens from predators. These people are basically lost, and we've got to protect our citizens from the criminal. I've been in places here the last 2 days where many people were living behind bars at their homes.
30 seconds is up. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Williams, you just mentioned that you want to add 60,000 prison units to the Texas prison system, perhaps at an estimated cost of $1.6 billion. Would state employee layoffs, attrition, or economic growth pay for those prison units? Specifically, where would the money come from?
Back in September a year ago, I detailed $1.6 billion in cuts to pay for my $1.5 billion plan to double the prison, beef up law enforcement. These cuts are a freeze on state hiring, exclude education, criminal justice, health care, a 7% cut in state operating expenses, the same 3 exceptions, repeal the prevailing wage law, 10% less automobiles, and I want to sell the 75 print shops, bid the printing work out to the private sector like we do the highways. I want to sell all of the 61 state airplanes except criminal justice and bid the flying work out again to the private sector. 6 specific cuts to pay for doubling the prison. That's the way I'll go if I'm elected governor. A new problem, where do we cut to pay for it?
Thank you. Ms. Richards, you have 30 seconds to respond.
You know, as treasurer, I voted to build 23,000 additional prison beds. I'm the only one in this race who has actually voted to build those beds, and we're going to have to build more. I don't know where that number 1,800 came from. We're not going to build 1,800 beds. We're going to build far more than that to get the prisoners out of the county jails. But I think it's possible for us to contract with local government for prisoners. I think it is important for us to explore the alternatives that cost us less money. Are there facilities available to us that are minimum security?
Ms. Richards, in the latest News for Texas Gallup poll, voters named abortion one of the top 5 issues in the campaign, yet you have said little about the subject. Specifically, should Texas law require mandatory parental consent?
Well, John, you haven't been with me on the trail. I've been talking about the right to privacy for a very long time and have been involved in this issue for a long time. I think any parents should be involved in such a difficult decision, regardless of the age. The problem is that when you write legislation, you have to take the exceptions like incest. Then what is the young woman going to do? The difficulty is that no recourse is offered to her, and what we're going to find is young women going to back alley butchers as they did in previous years, and no parent wants that. It is extremely important that we not have government interfere in what really is a private family decision. You cannot legislate that kind of decision making.
30 seconds, Mr. Williams.
Well, you can legislate many things. I believe in my heart that when a 13-year-old girl is pregnant, major problem for her life, that the parents should be involved. And I feel like that we must have legislation that they be involved in that decision, not just a thought they be involved. And I will work for legislation to involve the parents, that it's required for the parents to participate in that decision before she can have that abortion.
Mr. Williams, thank you.
Mr. Williams, you support strict abortion limits. You favor abortion in the cases of rape, incest, or danger to the mother's life.
That's correct.
As governor, would you sponsor laws in the legislature that would limit abortions?
I will work for the Republican legislative platform, which is parental consent, safe health clinics. For example, we have many young women died last year because abortion clinics weren't licensed. Another one of our plan is sex selection. We don't believe it's right for a child to be aborted because of its sex.
Thank you. Ms. Richards, your response?
Well, I'm afraid there's some misinformation here. Those clinics are required to be licensed. They are routinely examined by the health department. I think the important thing to remember here is that we are dealing with very private decisions. Where there are exceptions, you have to write them into the law. If the parents are not present, then this person must go before a judge. And the absurdity of it is that the judge's decision is if this person is too immature to make the decision, then she must bear the child. If she is mature enough to make the decision,
Thank you. Time is up.
She can terminate the pregnancy.
Ms. Richards, you're portrayed in your opponent's campaign advertising as soft on crime and criminals. Some of your proposed programs have the potential to put more dangerous criminals on the streets. Isn't that soft on crime?
I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about. I've been the one that has talked consistently about keeping the criminals in the penitentiary, serving their full time, particularly those who have committed violent crime. You see, as a woman, I am a part of the group of people most victimized by crime. I think that it is time that we had someone who really is going to get tough and understands government well enough to pass legislation and make it stick.
30 seconds, Mr. Williams, for your response.
Well, I think you have to point out that the county jails that were under the supervision of Ann Richards in Travis County, that they later found out they could open the locks with popsicles. I think we've got to get plumb serious about crime and keep those people behind bars with locks they can't open with a popsicle stick.
I think it's important to point out that that jail did not open that had those ineffective locks. It never opened until they were corrected.
Mr. Williams?
Is a question, what's the next
go ahead.
question?
Clarice?
Mr. Williams, there's one final question that must be asked tonight. One of the criticisms leveled at you is that you're an outsider who's unprepared for the demands of government service.
I consider that a compliment. Thank you.
Last night you said you were not familiar with Proposition 1 on the ballot even after you'd voted. The proposition concerns appointments the governor would make. Aren't your comments last night exactly what your critics are talking about?
Well, I had to just say that I forgot it. I was briefed on that amendment by Tom Craddock where we can keep things going with gubernatorial appointments in the session when you have a number of sessions compared to where we had session every 2 years. I just have to fess up, I forgot that. I was briefed on it, was aware of it, overlooked it.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Richards, the mood in this country seems to be throw out the politicians. You have made a career in politics, much of your life. Isn't it time for a fresh breath of air in state government?
Well, I have to tell you that most of my life I was a housewife and mother. I have been in public office now for about 12 years. I think that it's important for those of us who serve in office to be prepared to make government work. I think the fact that I served in local office is going to hold me in good stead because I firmly believe that it's time we had someone in the helm in Austin who's going to say you're not going to pass on to the local taxpayers any more responsibility. And if you can't fill the till, don't pass the bill. That experience is going to allow me to hit the ground running from day one, and I'm really proud of that.
Ms. Richards and Mr. Williams, 6 days remain until the voters of Texas decide your immediate and perhaps long-term political future and the future of our state. This is the last time before Election Day that the two of you will appear together in a setting which provides for an exchange of ideas, opinions, agreement, or disagreement. Any final thoughts, observations, or perhaps a question that you would like to ask your opponent? Ms. Richards?
Well, I would like, if it's my turn,
go ahead, Mr. Williams.
I would like to ask Ann, will she or will she not veto an income tax? Her state coordinator, Bill Hobby, has stated that the state needs an income tax. If the legislature passes a bill, as Hobby suggests, will you sign it if it comes to your desk if you're governor, or will you veto it? I think that's a very legitimate question. Will you sign it, or will you veto an income tax bill for Texans?
I'm totally against an income tax. Have said that consistently. I don't think an income tax is fair because I think the people with all the money in this country hire the lawyers and the CPAs to keep them from paying income tax. While we're on that subject, I think that anyone who's running for governor ought to make their income tax public for all of the people to see. The only thing really that I have to say is that I hope everyone will exercise their right to vote. They can vote absentee, no excuse, tomorrow, the next day, and then if you can't vote then, be sure and vote on Tuesday the 6th.
Ms. Richards, your turn. Do you have any final comments or perhaps a question for Clayton Williams?
Well, I think I've said everything I need to say. It's been a tough and hard campaign, and I know we'll all be pleased when Election Day gets here.
Yeah,
but the significant thing is that we live in a free society, and the exercising of a right to vote and electing our officials is a cherished right. And I urge everyone to be sure and go to the polls.
Mr. Williams?
I agree with that, and I would like to tell the people of Texas that I want to be your governor. I'll work hard, and I'll give you a day's work for a day's pay. Thank you for the opportunity to appear.
All right, we thank you both, Ann Richards and Clayton Williams.
Thank you, John and Clarice. It was great.
Thanks for joining us.
You're watching Election 90, C-SPAN's continuing coverage of the fall campaign season. A program reminder, join us Tuesday evening beginning at 8 o'clock p.m., 5 o'clock on the West Coast for coverage of the election returns. We'll take you to Los Angeles, Houston, Boston, Raleigh, and Tampa, Florida for a look at the television news coverage in those key states. We will also have guests in our Washington studio and, of course, take your phone calls to get your opinions on the campaign results.